Hi, my name is Master Gunnery Sergeant Mark Jenkins. I'm Principal Euphonium in the President's Own United States Marine Band. And today I'm going to be offering a mini masterclass on how to develop the mind's ear, specifically as it relates to reading and sight reading music. So over the years I've heard a lot of concerns kind of that tie into this from music students, both at the advanced level and also at the intermediate level, that talk kind of about how their struggles in how they approach music and how the skill can help them. I've listed some of these, and I thought we could open our class up today with reading a few of them. So the first one is that a lot of students have difficulty playing accurately in time. And I don't think they mean big swaths of time rushing or dragging. They just mean the little incremental things, rushing rhythms, not being able to hear exactly if you're right on beat or if you're dragging a little bit. Those are the little touches that really shine out, especially if you're in a professional audition, that can make or break a successful audition. Especially, they can't hear it in a performance, so they have to hear afterwards on a recording, or someone has to tell them after the fact that they were either rushing or dragging. Number two would be the difficulty accurately hitting wider intervals consistently in practice, and also, of course, especially in performance when the pressure is on. Another one would be the difficulty in retaining practice skills after finishing a session. So we've all been there where we've practiced something for hours on end, the next day we come back and for some reason we can't play it anymore. We still make the same mistakes in performance as well, even though we've practiced something over and over again. Very frustrating. Another one would be difficulty keeping up with the music when sight reading. We often get lost in the rhythms and notes. We just can't seem to keep our eyes and concentration moving forward with the music. And difficulty telling if you're sharp or flat unless someone tells you, or you listen back to a performance later. So these are all concerns that have a lot to do with what we call audiation, the skill of audiation. Now, if you're not familiar with that term, it's a very simple definition. Basically, it's the ability to hear and understand music when the sound is not physically present. So the best way I have to describe that is if you've ever had a song stuck in your ear for weeks or days on end, depending on how annoying the song is, you can hear every lyric, you can hear every sound, every beat of that song. And it really is very vivid in your mind. So that's basically audiation. So this skill, as it pertains to these concerns that I just listed, is really helpful and really useful as we give more emphasis to it in our practice sessions. Arnold Jacobs used to talk a lot about this. In fact, he said once that if there was ever a shortcut to mastering brass instruments, that the practice and mastery of the skill of audiation was it. So I'm going to start with an explanation of how I approach my use of audiation as part of my own practice and performance. And the best way that I can do that, so you really understand where I'm coming from and how I use it in my own practicing, is to relate it to how we learn to read words or prose. So I'm going to put in front of you a sentence in a foreign language. It's French. I was lucky enough to spend a few years in France when I was younger, so I picked up the language. So here's this phrase in French, and go ahead and pause the video and see if you can pronounce it with what you know of the French language. Okay, now if you speak French, obviously you're going to ace this, but if you don't, the proper pronunciation of this little sentence is je mange du pain. That just means I'm eating bread, right? Je mange du pain. Now that I've said it for you with the correct pronunciation, or as correct as I can pronounce it, why don't you repeat what I just said and try to mimic the pronunciation that I just said, je mange du pain. Go ahead and repeat. Je mange du pain. One more time. Je mange du pain. All right, so if you repeated that 5, 6, 7 times, you'd have it, all right? Even if I asked you 8 hours, from now to do it, your retention would be pretty good. Je mange du pain. It's really not that hard. So it's very simple in order to keep that in your mind, but I think we can all agree that you're not really reading what's on the page at this point or on the screen. You're just repeating the sounds that I'm giving you and committing that to memory, all right? Now that works okay in terms of short, simple sentences, but let me put another sentence on the screen for you. All right, so this is a little bit more complicated. So it has je mange du pain at the beginning, but of course there's a lot more after that. Go ahead and pause the screen again, pause the video again, and see if you can read this sentence. All right, so let me help you. The proper pronunciation is Je mange du pain et du fromage avec mon frère et sœur samedi matin à 8h30. All right, so we could go through the repetitions again like we did with the simple sentence, but it's going to take a lot longer, a lot more repetition, and I doubt your retention, let's say 8 hours from now, is going to be like the short sentence. So there's a problem there. At some point, we're going to have to learn the actual rules of pronunciation if we're going to have the retention that we need to speak the language properly. So it's very difficult for you to hear that because you don't really understand how it's supposed to sound. I've studied French, so I know how it sounds, so for me to read that sentence smoothly is very easy. Now let me put the English translation on the screen and go ahead and read that. All right, so it's very easy. I'm eating some bread and cheese with my brother and sister Saturday morning at 8:30. So because you've been taught years ago how each letter and vowel combination should sound in English, you know where to place emphasis that sound correct, you know how each word sounds, and so it's an instantaneous process in order to read smoothly. So when we were all little, we had to learn to look at words and to decipher what they sound like. When we first saw a book, we had no idea what they sounded like when we were children. We had to have an adult, a teacher, or a parent tell us how each syllable or each phonic sounded. We sounded out the words, the combination between the consonants and the vowels, and eventually it became second nature to us. We just remembered how each word sounded. Well, that's the same thing we have to do in music. Just like we use phonics in words to sound out a word and to eventually basically commit it to memory, we have to do the same thing with musical phonics. Now, what are musical phonics? Well, we have melodic intervals, scales. For you jazzers out there, chord progressions, tempi, rhythms. These are all elemental factors that go into Western music. And if we're ever going to read smoothly or sight read successfully, we have to be able to audiate all of those elements at the same time. So I find that when a lot of music students practice, they're depending far too much on developing their muscle memory through repetition, the type of repetition that we did with that first French sentence, instead of actively reading the music every time they play the piece through. We may use our ears at the beginning of a practicing, when we're trying to figure out what a song sounds like or a piece sounds like, but as we woodshed that and practice that, repeat that over and over and over again, the mind starts to take a back seat to muscle memory. And if we're not careful, the muscle memory will completely take over. And so our mind can be thinking about anything except what we're actually doing, but we're still playing the piece at the same time. So when it's time to perform, we find ourselves concentrating mostly on worrying if our muscles will remember what we did, the night before or 2 nights before, rather than just reading the music that's in front of us with the ability to audiate internally and make that translate into sound. So this is what Arnold Jacobs used to call letting the body lead the mind rather than the mind lead the body. And he had a really great example for it. He just used the example of someone reaching out and grabbing a glass of water and taking a drink. All right? When we're doing that, we don't think consciously of every muscle group and every synapse that's firing for us to take that drink. We just do it. We're product-oriented. We want to take the drink, we grab it, we take the drink. It's the same thing with the skill of audiation. When we're focusing on reading in real time using what we can hear in our mind's ear, we're focusing on the product, which is the sound. And that's a lot more useful in performance than trying to control all of these muscle groups that we can't possibly concentrate at the same time. Also, when we rely too much on muscle memory, that allows the brain to kind of wander and start thinking of things that aren't constructive, like nerves, exterior distractions of every kind that really start to affect our physical ability to perform. So let's talk about some principles of audiation that can help us in this process. So one of the most essential skills that links audiation with both reading and sight reading is the ability to read ahead about a beat from where we're playing at any given moment. So we should be able to see and mentally hear what's coming as we're playing the notes preceding it. So it's just like when we're reading words out loud and we're kind of scanning ahead slightly with our eyes to kind of see the word that's coming so we can continue to read smoothly. Whether you're practicing, performing, whether you're sight reading, this process of audiation, this skill, has to be consistent for you to really reap the benefits of being able to mentally audiate what you're playing. But the skill of looking ahead won't do us any good if, just like the French phrase, we don't know what it sounds like. So the types of audiation that we need to master can be divided into two groups or categories. The first is rhythmic audiation, and the second is tonal audiation. So first we're going to be talking about rhythmic audiation. So just like knowing what a note or a chord sounds like when we see it on a page, we also have to be able to audiate or mentally hear what different rhythms and tempos sound and feel like as well. So the first step to becoming conscious of this is to develop our ability to maintain a consistent mental pulse. So our first exercise with rhythmic audiation is going to be, thanks to John Philip Sousa, we're going to be using his Semper Fidelis March, which is the official march of the United States Marine Corps. And you're going to hear the march come over the video, and it's actually going to stop at certain intervals. There's going to be blank spots or silent spots. I want you to see if you can maintain a mental pulse as the march starts, and when the music stops, try to keep that pulse going. As we get farther into the march, those gaps are going to get wider and wider and wider. So you've got to keep your mental pulse consistent throughout those gaps of silence. When the music comes back in, you can check and see if you're still on the beat. So the next skill we need to know in audiating rhythms is being able to recognize and audiate rhythm at sight within any given tempo. So this takes practice with rhythmic etudes, like the one from drummer Louis Bellson that I'm putting on the screen. So this is from his book, Modern Reading in 4/4 Time. Let's sing this melody through twice. The first time with the metronome, so just set it at a comfortable tempo and read it through. Then go back without the metronome and record yourself doing it. So listen back to that recording with a metronome and see which rhythms you're having a hard time hearing. See if your internal rhythm or your internal pulse is accurate the entire etude through. And you'll quickly get a sense of which things you need to work on and which things you're really quite good at. So go ahead and pause the video and go through this exercise twice. Now let's move on to tonal audiation. So one of the simplest ways to start to develop your ability to mentally hear pitches when you play is through what I call a call and response type of practicing. So you can start by mentally hearing a note. Let's take F. Then you sing the note, F, and then you play it on your instrument. So if you can't audiate notes yet, like if you're saying, Mark, I'm not hearing before I sing this, that's fine. Go ahead and play a note like on a piano or something so you can get the pitch, then hear it in your mind, then sing it, then play it. All right? So this kind of call and response is something I do as part of my warm-up routine every morning. What I like to do is hear a pattern, like starting on F, then I'll sing it, like da 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 dum bum pee. You can even go down a half step. and so on and so forth. It's really helpful to getting those sounds really vividly in your ear. But the important thing to remember, though, is to hear it first, mentally hear it first, then sing it, then play it. And the reason I have singing in that process is there's just no better way that I've found to really get those sounds to stick in the ear, so to speak. They really become vivid in your mind in terms of your aural memory when you sing them. And also, it's a lot harder to sing than it is to play on the instrument because you don't have valves to control your pitch. So go ahead and pause the video, pick a note, and see if you can mentally build a pattern around it and audiate, sing, and then play it. So the next technique we can use to learn to audiate pitch is to take time every day to practice hearing and singing melodic intervals away from the instrument. So Arnold Jacobs used to do this type of practice 20 minutes a day. He highly recommended it. And of course, we know this famous story when Arnold Jacobs was at the Curtis School of Music. He actually took more solfege classes than were required because he was so enthralled in being able to master the skill of audiation. So I try to do a little bit more than 20 minutes depending on how much time I have, but I definitely do this every single time that I practice. It's part of my routine. So one of the books that I've been using for quite a while now is a little book by jazz trombonist Glenn Martin entitled The Well-Tempered Instrumentalist. And it's a really great book. So what he does in this book, at least the first few chapters, is he takes you through the entire range of melodic intervals from minor second all the way up to a full octave. But his exercises take you through each interval through every key in the circle of fifths. So when you're looking at this whole step exercise, not only do you have to hear the whole step, but you have to hear it at each of the 12 keys. So you're having to hear a perfect fourth up or a perfect fifth down as you modulate to each of those key centers. So it forces your ear and your eye to look and hear ahead as you're singing through the exercise. It's really great. And again, the goal here is so that when you look at a piece of music, whether you're sight reading or you're reading through something that you're preparing, you can instantly recognize an interval by sight. So even if it's a minor seventh, you can recognize that interval instantly, and you can hear that interval as it reads on the page instantaneously. Just like when we read words, we're reading them instantaneously. We don't have to sound out words anymore as we're advanced readers. So this is going to build up that speed of audiation so that you can read in real time exactly what's happening on the piece of music. So go ahead and pause the video and try to sing through this. And if it takes you a little bit of time, if you go through slowly, that's fine. But see if you can build up your speed and really start hearing those major seconds and fourths and fifths as you go through. If you want a real challenge, go backwards through the circle of fourths through the exercise. So now that we've gone over some principles of both rhythmic and tonal audiation, let's see if you can use these skills to audiate some melodies that I put up on the screen. So here's your first melody. Here's your first note. It's an E. And the tempo is a march tempo. So it's about like this. And you can guess what the melody is if you'd like. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can audiate this famous melody all the way through really vividly in your mind. Okay, it's the Indiana Jones theme, right? Now that you know what it is, or if you guessed it right away, how much easier is it for you to audiate it? Because you're that much more familiar with it. So if you need to pause again, see if you can audiate it and really hear vividly in your mind what it sounds like, both rhythmically and tonally. All right, let's go on to our next melody. So this melody is in G minor, starts on a D. And the tempo is a little bit slower here. So it's more like this. Again, very famous melody. So take the time to really listen through. You're trying to hear a pulse. You're trying to hear the rhythms as well as the tones all at the same time. So if this was a sight reading excerpt, say in a professional audition or a school audition, just think how much confidence you'd have being able to audiate these themes as well as you can, because they're so common. We know them. We all know them. We grew up with them. So the point is that as you practice the concept we've talked about in this class daily, you'll be able to audiate any melody or any rhythm as well as you can audiate the two themes that we just saw. And that's the key, being able to hear anything at sight in your mind before you play it. So in closing, let's just review quickly some of the concepts that we went over today. First and foremost, in the words of Arnold Jacobs, if there was ever a shortcut to mastering a brass instrument, the learning of the skill of audiation is it. He used the word solfege because that's what he used. You can use solfege, you can use the number system, you can use note names, you can just say la, it doesn't matter. Whatever helps you to internally hear pitch and rhythm, that's what you use, and you work on it daily. Number two, always keep the upcoming notes and rhythms in the forefront of your mind when you're reading and sight reading. Remember, you have to hear it first and then play it. Recording sight reading, and you're playing every day and listening back for reference in terms of what you have to work on. We talked about that during the rhythmic etude. It'll really save you a lot of time to listen back and hear exactly what you're hearing and what you're not hearing well and what you're not hearing, all right? And then lastly, sight reading and other audiation exercises need to be a part of your daily practicing. I know sometimes it's a drag to practice off the instrument, but I promise if you put in the time daily to really work and hone and master these audiation skills, when you do start practicing on the horn, it'll be so much more effective, and you'll be amazed at not only how quick you can learn pieces, but your retention rate will be at least twice as much as it was when you were focusing too much on getting the reps in and trying to get the muscle memory to kind of take over the show. So I hope you can take the principles that we discussed today and apply them to your practice and, of course, your performances. I promise they really will make a fantastic difference in the way that you approach the instrument. Thank you so much for watching.